Okay, got a listener question. You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Why do many Protestant um, presentations of the gospel focus only on believing and accepting Jesus without emphasizing the true belief that true belief must result in obedience to him? You're putting a lot. I mean, the question is by nature putting, you know, one brush on all Protestant churches. Because my first reaction was that, at least my experience growing up, was that that wasn't the case. That there was like your your actions needed to be perfect, otherwise it proved you weren't a Christian, and that there was actually very little emphasis on believing and accepting Christ, and there was a ton of emphasis on behavior, needing to be perfect to prove that you were a Christian. But I also know that there's a lot of Protestant churches that are kind of more seeker friendly and are saying like, "Hey, everyone's welcome. You're forgiven. Just believe in
Just
Jesus."
believe.
And then there was no emphasis on the fact like, "Hey, you're as a result of that, your life will be different." Um,
I think that is the teaching part. And I mean, we get that. We get that teaching, but I think that's the part that everywhere just need, that should be a result. I think the problem is when you preach to people as if they're none of them can be saved or are saved, then quickly it's like, hey, just look this way. And now you just have a bunch of,
false
well, just people that are
behavior,
really deceived,
behavior modified people
behavior modified people that
without
are
heart
just
transformation.
pretending. Yeah. And I
Yeah,
mean, well, then essentially you have the true meaning of a hypocrite where, and it'll never work.
yeah.
Right. Because it's like, you're actually only going to really be that deep change is only going to come through
Yeah.
the work of Jesus. Right. And I think that that's where
And
people,
also people that don't talk about their sin or don't like won't confess their sins because they always have this idea they have to have like be perfect and have all their stuff together. And so
yeah,
uh
on the flip side, I think that question probably comes from a space where people are thinking, hey, these people actually have no idea their sin. Why would they ever think they need to be saved? They don't even realize they're sinful. Right. And I think that probably, if I was if you're preaching a sermon, you'd be like, hey, those are your ditches, right? And like obviously you want to stay out of either ditch, and it'd be very easy to go either direction based on your upbringing as a kid or based on your fear, right? Like you're going to be like, hey, is this easy? Are people deceiving themselves? Well, for sure they are. Like that's humans do that, right? I do think that if you're not just giving a very super surface level teaching, I mean, eventually you're going to move on from that spot of, hey, believe. And then it's like, well, then what? And like, how should your life live? And like, are you practice like, and that's where I think,
well, if you look at most of Paul's letters to the
yeah,
churches in the New Testament, there isn't very much emphasis on you need to be saved. It's almost all only talking about
well, it's
how
because he's
to.
preaching to Christians.
That's right, and how to live.
He's writing letters to the church, and it was assumed that the people in the church were Christians, right? And
Exactly.
that's where
Otherwise, why
like,
would you go to church?
yeah, why would you? But I mean, and I think that's where if you get into that spot of, um, when people are critiquing churches, like if churches, as a general rule, just picked whole books of the Bible and preached through them,
Mhm.
right? And left no verses unspoken and dove into verses that were uncomfortable. And I've seen it before at
Yeah.
many different churches where it's like they literally have the stop point or the stop, like they have it in a weird spot. I'm like, no, you're missing the whole,
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and even then, if you preach on a few verses, I would say, hey, you would probably want to read the chapter.
Yeah.
Like you'd want to get the context. And then you'd want to even blow out a little bit, step a little bit
Yeah.
further back and look at, hey, what was the point of the letter that Paul was writing to this church, right?
Yeah. So John Calvin actually taught that. Taught pastors that preach chapter by chapter, verse through verse, for that reason.
Yeah.
And growing up, actually, we at nighttime they would preach through the Lord's Days, the
Yeah.
Catechism, and they did that. The reason they said they did that was because so you didn't miss any of the parts of the different theologies in the Bible. You couldn't just pick one or the other. But I think, of course, more importantly, to do that with the Bible. But anyway, I texted Pastor Jonathan about it and asked what his thoughts were. And he said, it would probably depend on who I'm talking to, but I would agree. Belief and obedience go hand in hand. However, I think the Protestant emphasis comes from the fact that the order matters. Right action without right belief doesn't save or even happen. See Romans 8, verse 7 and 14, verse 23. Faith is what must precede our obedience. So the emphasis is a matter of order, not necessarily of importance. The other reason is that while true faith always results in fruit, obedience, we may not see it. The thief on the cross does not live long enough to do anything good, yet Jesus promises him salvation. Faith precedes good works. Both are part of salvation. And then he gives a quote from Martin Luther, which is, "Salvation is by faith alone, but not by a faith that is alone. Which I like. And
reminds me of another thing that we heard on Sunday. It was like, you can give without loving, but you can't love without giving, right?
Yeah. Amy Carmichael.
Yeah.
What was it? I think it was written down here. One can give without loving, but one cannot love without giving.
Yeah.
Giving is the very nature. I mean, that's what God gave, right? He gave himself. And that is the ultimate, act of love. I think it also, it brings out certain things, like, for example, the guy that sent in this question was talking about, if you do not forgive others, your heavenly Father will not forgive you. So essentially, holding a grudge can block your entrance to eternal life. And it reminds me of the example that Ken talks about in Freedom Session of the man that was owed a whole bunch of money to the king, whatever. I can't remember where it is. And the king forgave him. Then he had a guy that, owed him a little bit of money. And he's like,
denary or
whatever, I'm going to send you to jail for not owing me this. And how, like, we've been forgiven so much by God. How can we not forgive the people that have hurt us? Even though it might even be extreme hurt, think of like Trevor and things like that. So, but I think there is just, we also can't demand it, right? And be like, you have to forgive now. Like, there is, like, healing takes time. But we also got to make sure there's no excuses.
Interesting.
What part?
Chicken and the egg. Like I say, I think people get really uncomfortable with things that it's just way easier to go after what other people are doing wrong than it is to just worry about what we're doing wrong.
Yes.
That's really what.
Yeah.
It's just so much easier, right? Because we have our whole frame of reference of how we think everything should be worded and said and taught. And then if something goes against that, we don't assume that we might be wrong. We just cannot believe how somebody else could be so offside, right? It's fascinating.
And one of the things that I was taught in the coaching principles, when you're coaching someone, is that people naturally look for evidences of things that they already believe. So if you have a set belief already on whatever it is, you look for evidence in your worldview, how you're looking at things, to prove that's already true. We don't naturally challenge your own beliefs or how.
Well, it's too unsettling.
Exactly. Yeah. But then you can really be offside, right?
Some people get really honest about that too, and it's really fascinating and it's really cool.
Yeah, that's when change happens.
Yeah, but it's terrifying, right? Because usually there's a lot of things that are attached to that, from family to friends to everything, especially in a situation where it's like, hey, this is really going to rattle cages. Right?
Yeah, and then it goes back to trust in God. You trust God will keep you safe in whatever He's asking you to do to move forward in faith. Like, is He enough? Are you willing to, like, what does it say? Lose dad and mom and sons and daughters for my sake? Like, will you give it all up? Like, will you give up? Like that one guy at Freedom Session, he was like, he felt God had challenged him early on in his career. Do you think you'd give up your career in aviation for me? And he resisted it, for a long time. And I think we have these things in our life that we're not willing to give up, if it's our money or if it's our time or if it's our image, whatever it is. It is challenging. That reminds me of something else. So Trey sent me a quote this week. Hey guys, if you enjoyed that episode and were blessed by it, would you be willing to support the show? That would help a lot in creating more content, improving the quality of the content, putting the production value, getting more guests on, and me being able to spend more time and energy towards it. So if you're interested in doing that, you can click up here and it'll take you to a support page. But you can also subscribe to the podcast by clicking over here and doing that. Thanks again for listening, and I'll catch you on the next one.